Welcome to the All Around Joe podcast, where we optimize your human performance from my personal experience as an athlete, coach, and all-around self-improvement junkie. On this edition of the All Around Joe podcast, I am talking with the Blonyx founder and CEO, Rowan Minnion. And you guys have probably heard me talk to Rowan in the past all about supplementation and Blonyx and all kinds of other cool stuff, including snowboarding and mountain biking, and we just like to have fun chatting with each other. On this podcast, though, we are going to deep dive into something that Rowan is an expert at that you may not have known. He is a sleep expert and has actually done a lot of research on sleep while getting his PhD. So we're going to deep dive in. We're going to talk about how you can improve your sleep. We're going to talk about what he thinks is the most important and or number one thing that you need to really be focusing on, and then a couple of other little things along the way as well. So I hope you enjoy this podcast, and don't forget to check out Blonyx, which is Rowan's company, and if you would like to get a little discount, use the code AllAroundJoe to get yourself 10% off any of the Blonyx products at blonyx.com, because I love Blonyx as well and take them. I've been taking them for years. So anyway, there you have it. Enjoy the podcast, and I will see you on the flip side. Rowan, welcome back on the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I know that we had you just recently on the show, and we didn't get to talk about sleep at all, which is something that we had wanted to talk about. So thank you so much for your time to come back on and geek out with me again.
No problem at all. We were just having too much fun last time.
Yeah, absolutely. So if anybody wants to reference that podcast that we did with Rowan, you can do so at allaroundjoe.com/241. But really quickly, Rowan, would you mind giving us a brief background? And then if people want to go deep dive into everything, they can go back to 241.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CEO of a company called Blonyx Biosciences. We're a sports nutrition brand. But my background is as a research scientist. So I used to be an exercise physiologist working with athletes on various sides of performance. I progressed from there to start working in the area of sports nutrition specifically. And then I kind of pivoted from there and then ended up as a sleep researcher. In London, I actually started my work on a PhD in sleep medicine. This is quite a long time ago, but I ran sleep labs there in London, and I've read a lot about sleep and performance, and understand a lot about sleep and the medical side of it. It's a big fun part of my life, kind of thing. But since then, moved on to get into the business side of sports nutrition and start Blonyx as a company. But still very much fond of my history in sleep and my understanding on it. And I'm here to geek out on
that. Cool. So let's start with why sleep. Why did you do the PhD with a focus in sleep in the first place?
So I actually kind of fell into it. I was based out at Iowa State University in the States. I was playing soccer there for Iowa State, and also as a research scientist on the research park there. And my visa ran out. I was there for 2 years, and my visa came to an end. So I moved back to the UK, to London, and I needed a job. And I saw a job posting as a physiologist in a sleep lab, and basically took the job. I was meant to be just running the sleep labs there, and I got in there very quickly. They saw my research background. I had commercial research history. And they figured out I could run studies for them. And so I was moved into that role, and we managed to raise some money to start my PhD. And I kind of fell into it, but it's something that is, I tell you what I loved about it. What attracted me to it was the fact that it's an area, a frontier of science that is there's still so much unknown. We know so little about sleep, which is crazy when you think that we do it for, 6 to 8 hours a night, most of us. But we really do know so little about it. So as soon as I got into the research role in the PhD, straight away I was on the forefront of science and discovering stuff that no one had before. So that was, for me, was the real love of it, jumping into that.
That's so cool. Just so that we can kind of unpack it just a little bit more as you understand it, or however you explain it, what is sleep exactly?
So That's the big question. I think that's ultimately what every sleep research lab is trying to figure out. What is sleep? Why do we sleep? There's kind of two sides of research on there. If I can kind of summarize it. Firstly is a physical thing. So it's about the physical rest that your body needs. We're quite active as species go. We do a lot in general, move around, less so nowadays because of the inventions that we've got, like cars and things like that. But we traditionally are quite active as human beings. We need to eat quite a lot compared to a lot of animals and mammals that are out there. And so the idea is that we sleep to regenerate our tissues. There's, for example, we release about 50% of our growth hormone in the first 2 or 3 hours of sleep when we hit deep sleep there, and it is the hormone that regenerates causes recovery effectively from any exercise or any physical damage that you've done throughout the day. So there's real good evidence that it's physically a regenerative process. And then there's also the psychological side of it and memory. This is kind of very well known, or it's a theory still. We don't know it, but it's the psychological or the memory side of it is that when you do go to sleep, your brain starts to process all the information that it's taken in throughout the day and start to decide things like, what should I commit to long-term memory and what should I commit to short-term memory, through the night. So rapid eye movement sleep, the kind of dream state that we go in, it's crazy what happens to your body and your brain through that period. And they still think it's to do with some sort of organization in the brain, like shutting down a computer kind of thing overnight.
Yeah. And just so that we can continue to go down this road, what are and maybe there's way more to this than we want to get into, but what are the different stages of sleep, or at least the ones that people are focusing on?
Mm-hmm. So there's 5 stages of sleep, basic level. There's stage 1 through to 4. And then there's another stage called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And they're all quite different, well, kind of different. Stage 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 are quite similar to each other, though, if that makes sense. So stage 1 and 2 is like a light sleep. It's when when you start drifting off to sleep. Sometimes we jolt awake. When you're just about to go to sleep. That's waking up for stage 1 or 2 sleep. We can very easily be woken up at that time. Weirdly enough, we can have like slightly we could actually have dreams in that time. It's not the same as rapid eye movement sleep. It's much more realistic dreams. It's almost like a daydreaming that we can have. So as we drift off to sleep, we can have this weird daydreaming about the day or something like that. So that happens there. And in that period, your brain starts to shut down. The waves of your brain waves are very quick through the day when you're awake. And they start to slow down a little bit here and there. And that's how you know someone's drifting off to sleep into that stage 1, 2 sleep there. Then there's stage 3 and 4 and what we call alpha wave sleep. And stage 3 and 4 are basically your entire brain, the wave of your brain waves basically start to really slow down. They become these huge waves, really slow down like that. And your whole body shuts down, very deep sleep. It's like an inactivity. That's the real shutdown stuff. That's when you release that growth hormone. Lots of hormonal changes happen in your body. It's the regenerative one. That's the sleep. Stage 3 and 4 deep sleep is the one that you need. It's really important. If you don't get it, your life will be hell. So that's in my opinion, the most important side of sleep. Then there's the really weird one. The really weird one is REM sleep, which is it's really hard to see it. When you see it, it's amazing what happens to the body. The first thing that happens is that the entire body goes into paralysis. So one of the ways that you measure it is by putting 2 electrodes underneath someone's chin. And the reason is because underneath the chin, that kind of soft, fleshy bit that you got underneath your chin bone, that's always a little bit active. And so if you put 2 electrodes on, the only time that muscle really shuts off is when you're in this rapid eye movement sleep. So you'll suddenly see the kind of signal from that muscle drop out. And that's one of the ways that we know that someone has gone into REM sleep. So your body completely goes into paralysis and you do not move at all. It's almost like your brain shuts off all signal to your body. And then the second thing is that your brain wakes up, and it wakes up to a brain wave that is about the same as when you are awake. So your brain turns on, and your eyes, the reason it's called rapid eye movement sleep, your eyes start to flitter from side to side like you're reading something really quickly, like that. And so the way we measured it in the sleep labs is you put electrodes on the face either side of the eye and then under the chin. And you suddenly see these flits in the eye, and then you see the nothing coming from the chin, like that. And you drop into it usually late on. It's the second half of the night. And it's when dreams come from. So if you wake someone up in the middle of that rapid eye movement sleep, they can generally quite recall their dreams pretty well in that time. But it happens the second half of the night. And I know that if I press the snooze button when I'm waking up, if I ever do that I kind of have these really weird dreams at that time. And it's probably because I'm going back into REM sleep when I snooze.
Yeah.
So that's the 5 stages there. They're all quite bizarre when you see them. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I want to ask you, what was the focus for your study or your sleep education and PhD?
So we did a few things. The main one, my primary one, was looking at a condition called central sleep apnea. So sleep apnea is I think it's probably one of the most undiagnosed conditions in North America as a sleep condition, and it's where your airway shuts down, basically shuts when you fall asleep. So you get into that deep sleep I was talking about. Your airway shuts down, and suddenly you can't breathe properly, and you have to wake up to then open your airway again. So that's sleep apnea, and that's a lot of North American people have it. It's associated with generally being unhealthy and overweight, which increases the weight around your neck. But sometimes people who do not fit that mold get it too. And a lot of people who are quite fit, and especially bodybuilders, can get it too because they have a lot of muscle weight around their neck. So that's a form of sleep apnea that a lot of people have heard about. But there's another form called central sleep apnea, and it's pretty horrific. It's when the brain actually tells you to stop breathing when you fall asleep. And it is horrific. It's we're having a lot more people survive heart attacks or have heart failure because medicine is a lot better at keeping people alive now. But we find that about 50% of people who have survived a heart attack or have heart failure, they develop this central sleep apnea. So their brain is effectively telling them to stop breathing as soon as they fall asleep. Now, you can imagine what that would be like, living that hell. These guys not being able to sleep at night, and they don't have any form of good sleep. They have to sleep upright, and even that doesn't alleviate it. It's a horrific condition, and most of the people that have it, about 50% of the people have it, will be dead within a year. They'll the blood pressure will go up, and they'll have a heart attack or a stroke within a year. So so my work was basically, how can we treat that? And working with a company that created a ventilator. So quite similar to the ones that we're seeing now with the coronavirus. Go with those ventilators. We developed a form of ventilator like that as soon as these guys stopped breathing and their brain told them to stop breathing, the ventilator would take over and start breathing for them. And that was our work to kind of develop that and test it and analyze the results from that, if we could keep these guys alive, basically.
Interesting. So the first thing that comes to mind when you mention that is, if you are changing the position, or if you could change the position of your sleep, would that change the ability to get sleep apnea?
If it's the usual form of sleep apnea, then it can do. Yeah, people find if they sleep upright, they sit up in bed. So prop a lot of pillows behind you, you can actually alleviate it that way. But the most common way is through what they call a CPAP machine. It's if you can imagine this, it sounds horrific. It's not actually that bad, but it's like turning a vacuum cleaner and putting it in reverse so it blows air, and then forcing that onto your face with a mask. That's effectively what this thing is, a treatment for sleep apnea. They're a lot smaller, compact, and they don't sound like a vacuum cleaner anymore. But they basically blow air into your airways and it keeps them open. It's kind of like blowing into a balloon. It keeps the airway pressure up to keep it open.
Okay, gotcha. And how have you been able to take this knowledge on sleep and use it for improving performance, recovery, all of this stuff that we're like super into these days?
So I think that kind of comes around just understanding sleep in general, studying so many people with sleep and with sleep problems, just kind of nerding out on it and understanding it. And that's kind of where it comes from. So in understanding sleep architecture and the improvement and how important it is to have the deep sleep, and then looking at things like hormone changes over that time, the physiological regeneration over that time, that started to get me, because I was an athlete at the time, started to get me thinking much more about my sleep and the importance of it and what I can do to improve my personal sleep. And that's why I started to just, it's almost like too much, and therefore you start applying it, to your personal life kind of thing.
Yep.
And that's basically what happened there.
Awesome. So when you first start working with people and people have a lot of questions and issues with their sleep, obviously, where do you start when you bring this into the equation? Are you tracking? Are you answering questions? Are you giving people more knowledge? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the very first thing, so if I was working with somebody on their sleep and saying, how can you use sleep to improve performance, or if you've got issues sleeping? Because ultimately the answer to the question, how do you use sleep to improve your performance, is make sure you get enough sleep and it's high quality sleep. Sure. Those two things will improve your performance. That's it. There is, we can talk about it later, but there's definitely an interesting discussion to have about elite performance and guys who are at the elite level, and we'll talk about that after. But in general, if someone says, hey, my performance, I never get enough sleep and my performance is impacted, I'm always tired, and it makes it hard to motivate myself to train, or I'm not getting enough out of it, then the first thing I would do, the absolute first thing, is to make sure they don't have any issues with their sleep they don't know about. The biggest issue with sleep is that if you have a sleep issue, you don't know about it. Right. Even if you have a bed partner, the chances of them being awake and listening to you throughout the night is breathing or having any issues is difficult too. So that's why I think it goes undiagnosed if people have a sleep issue. So the first thing I do is ask questions about, in general, like, do they wake up suddenly throughout their sleep breathless? Do they kind of suddenly, and they're breathing heavy, and which can be an indicator they do have a slight sleep apnea or something like that. So the first thing is to just eliminate the medical side of it. So assuming that that's okay and there's no issues medically from just talking with them, the second one is about what they call sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene is a general term, and all it means is how you approach sleep. For example, do you go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day? Or at weekends, do you tend to go to bed later, which causes you to have a little, almost like jet lag when it comes to Monday morning, that kind of thing. And so that kind of thing. It's also, are you blacking out your blinds and keeping the room relatively cool, relatively dark? Is there a lot of noise that could wake you up? Do you have a comfortable enough bed? There's even some feng shui kind of aspects to it. And people say, you should have your bed in a certain location in your bedroom, things like that. It's quite an art form. And there are a lot of sleep doctors out there who that's the first thing they'll work on, and is just changing people's environment that they sleep in. And the other one is, as part of that, is the routine that people have around their sleep. A big issue nowadays, and a bit hot topic, is about screen use going to sleep, and it affecting the light hitting your eyes, which is, interestingly, the way that you regulate your sleep is the light hitting your eyes. So that could be an impact. So the next one is to look at that and create some form of routine around their sleep. The biggest one for me, the absolute biggest one along those lines, is going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time every night. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, do it every single night, including weekends. Bring that discipline into your life to do that. And you will find that you fall asleep quicker, you wake up feeling refreshed, you very rarely need your alarm clock, and you don't get, the big one is you don't get that after lunch dip, that a lot of people can get after eating there.
Yep.
You get that, and then you'll find your energy levels through the day will be steady there.
Very interesting stuff. How much sleep do you think people need?
The answer to that isn't straightforward. So on average, let's talk about on average.
Sure.
I think people should get between 7 and 8 hours sleep a night on average.
Okay.
If you go for start at 7.5 hours, so if you're going to go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, start with 7.5 hours, see how you do. If you do not feel rested after that time, increase it to 8. If you feel like you're waking up too early, and then reduce it. But it's a very individual thing. I need about 7.5 hours of sleep a night. My wife needs about 6. Oh. And that's standard. Like she does really well with not much sleep, and to the point where if she sleeps the same time as I do, night length that I do, then she will actually not feel great the next day. And I think it's just her body clock is shorter than mine, like that. So kind of figure it out yourself, but in general, between 7 and 8.
Super interesting. How can you improve the quality of the sleep, or what are the first things that you're having people do in order to improve the quality of sleep, and then actually know that they are improving the quality of the sleep?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the routine going into sleep. That's actually no. Let's go a step further back. Let's talk about what you do during the day. In the morning and through the day. So the very first thing that you can do to ensure you sleep well at night is to get good light hitting your retina, so hitting your eye, because that resets our body clock every single day. So get outside, get some fresh air, go in the morning if the sun is shining today, get out there, get that sunlight hitting your eyes as early as you can in the morning. It works really well if you're changing time zone. Get up in the morning at that wherever you are and get outside. So that's the first one, is spend as much time as you can outside, looking at the sunlight through the normal day. The second one is having a routine at night when you go into bed. Get in something that is less taxing on your brain, or less taxing on your I think it's more your emotional system, your hormone system, so your adrenal system. Especially because adrenaline and one of the stress hormones, cortisol, is what keeps you up. So cortisol, the stress hormone, is the biggest thing that wakes you up. It wakes you up in the morning. You get a massive dose of it in the morning. With coffee, as soon as you drink a cup of coffee, it gives you a big boost of cortisol. At night, you should be doing everything to bring that level down. If you are watching a movie, let's say a horror movie, that gets your adrenaline right up again and your cortisol level right up. So do not watch horror movies late at night. Don't do anything. TV in general can get our emotions moving a lot more, and get you kind of heightened in that respect. So try not to watch TV late into the evening. Give yourself an hour or so before you go to bed, and do something that's slower for your mind as you go to bed. So reading is fantastic. It doesn't matter what you read. Anything you read it in the evening before you go to bed. Have a lower light level around you and read before you go to bed. It really works well to start shutting the brain down and getting you down like that. Have discussions with your partner, like one-to-one, and just having a general discussion about your day or something like that. Something that's simply more relaxing and chill you out, brings down that cortisol level, which will help you go to sleep there.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I've read some stuff about the first thing that you talked about with getting the sunlight in the morning. And I'm guessing that there are people that need a little bit of clarification on this, and that will wake up in the morning, they open up their blinds and they're like, oh, the sun's coming through the window. This is great. I'm getting this done. Does that work, or do you actually have to go outside?
It can. I think you're always going to be better being outside. The light difference between inside and outside is almost always a massive difference. We don't see it as much of a difference because our eyes adjust to it. Mm-hmm. So when you're indoors, your pupils will dilate and you'll let a hell of a lot more light in. And then when you're outside, they do the opposite. They close, kind of thing. So You'll notice in the summer, when we've been outside for a long time and we go indoors, it's almost like you can't see much.
Yep.
And that's exactly it. So there's that extreme there. So I would say get outside, simply because the light is always so much more. Even if it's a really overcast, cloudy day, getting outside will give you far more light than being inside.
Okay. And then when you're closing your day down and you're reading something, do you have to do it? And I'm guessing I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you because you're the expert. Do you have to do it on a non-screen device?
Yeah, I would suggest it. I think the Kindles are excellent nowadays with the virtual paper that they have, and that will be fine. That doesn't really the Kindle I have an old school Kindle, so I actually need a light to read it. But I know the new ones aren't so bad either, and it's not that much light. But I think the majority of phone screens are the worst, and phone screens, laptop screens, anything like that. Even with the filters that take out the blue light, I don't think that makes much of a difference. I don't know the research on that, the initial research, and when I worked in a sleep lab, they were starting to come out with those filters, and the general consensus amongst us scientists were that it's not much. It's kind of encouraging people to actually go back to their screens at night, where we should tell them 0 is better than using a filter.
Okay, and does that include like the blue light blocking glasses?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I don't really know the research on them, but in general, the fact that blue light is what changes everything is actually, I think it's a bit of a generalization. I want to see the research. I'm not up to date on it as a disclaimer, so I won't want to make claims on it. But in general, the way we saw it is you should generally be getting less light, and general, you should be in a darker situation like we would be if it wasn't for artificial light.
Okay. Is that why people will say try and have red light at night? Is it because it's darker? Is there a different wavelength? Do you know?
Yes. So the red light one was an interesting one, and I definitely think it's there's something in that. When you use red light, it creates good contrast between blacks and other colors, basically. So red light is often used in night vision type scenarios. You have a red light up, and it helps see a lot more, but at a much lower level light in general. So if you have to go any light, then red light would definitely be a better option.
Cool. How do you recommend that people are keeping track of improvement or just like their sleep status in general? Are you using any apps? Do you recommend journaling? Is there any kind of technology?
Yeah, I think the sleep apps out there and things like Fitbit and things like that are actually quite good. So they use what they call, they tend to use a form of actigraphy, which is you're basically monitoring movement levels at night. And when you are having a good night's sleep, it's an obvious thing, really. You're actually a lot less active through night. So even though it's a quite primitive form of measurement for using things like that, these technologies, I think it's worth it. It's if you are less active through the night and you're not moving that Fitbit or something, Apple Watch or whatever around so much, it is a good indicator that you've had a better night's sleep. But there is that understanding it still is a primitive method. It's a general method on that. I think journaling, even the simplest thing of just in the morning, write a score of how you feel. Do you feel rested? Do you feel awake? And do you feel tired or whatever? Just put a score in there out of 10, and do that on a general basis. Like, did you have to wake up with your alarm clock or not? So there's some simple questions you can ask yourselves, and I think a lot of these sleep measurement apps do a pretty good job of at least having some of that information in there. So it's definitely worth doing. But being honest, I find that as soon as you start going to sleep and waking up at the same time every day, doing that, you'll notice the difference in general. It's quite the stark difference if you don't normally do that.
How does exercise affect this?
Great question. Now the fun stuff. So the first one is, it's kind of got a yin and yang side of it, exercise, because exercise can, in general, give you a much better sleep architecture. It's it's almost like your body knows, if especially if you've been training hard, that your body needs to recover more. So you'll have deeper sleep. You'll go into deeper sleep a lot quicker, and you'll stay there for a lot longer, and you'll release more growth hormone, which is the hormone that causes your protein production to increase and get into that recovery stage. So that's well documented in the research there. However, when you exercise, the research shows that you increase the amount of the stress hormone cortisol in your body intermittently. So your adrenaline goes up, your cortisol levels go up, especially if you overtrain, if you overexercise, if you really push yourself. It's almost like the body has a little bit of a shock to it, and it kind of releases all these stress hormones to get your performance up. If you do that too close to going to sleep, you're going to have a harder time falling asleep. So that's how it can impact it there. So general recommendation is, if you're going to really go hell for leather on your training and you want to make sure you optimize your sleep, don't train too late in the day. Train in the morning, afternoon. If you want to see your sleep improve, stay out of that kind of overreaching, really pushing yourself zone. Stay under it. Keep your body in good shape, and just don't do that overtraining so much. Keep your volume relatively low.
Yeah, interesting. I've got a quick question for you around this. So last week, I personally had a couple of days where I really crushed it, really pushed hard, knew that when I was in the middle of the workout, I was pushing and cranking to 10. And I actually didn't have any sleep issues until a few days later. So, and I rarely have sleep issues, but I just couldn't fall asleep. And it felt like if I were to measure my cortisol levels, I would have assumed that was what was going on, is that they were raised. Have you noticed, or is there any kind of correlation that you've heard of that could have happened like days after like that?
Yeah, that might be, it depends. I mean, there's so many kind of compounding factors in there that we're not controlling, like your coffee intake over that time might be different. It could be to do with anything stressful that's going on in your mind or anything like that. There's a lot to it than that, but let's say in general what could cause that, if in general you're overtraining, it can suppress some hormones. It can just generally disturb your sleep overall. So you might have done that exercise, your body is like I need an emergency sleep for the first 1 or 2 nights. And then it goes back to this whole, like, my body is still in overtraining mode. I've still got a lot of damage here. I haven't recovered fully from that kind of hard hitting exercise there. And that's when your sleep is disrupted like that. Because sometimes if you exercise really heavily to the point where your body is in competition. Here's an example. Competition is a great one. If you do say a CrossFit competition or something like that, or you're marathon runner, or big one is triathletes, Ironman triathletes. After they've done a triathlon or a CrossFit competition or something like that, your body is so beat that you will pass out almost, and you'll pass out that night, and then the next day you will feel groggy as hell, and then you'll have sleep issues after that.
Yep.
So it's almost like your body needs an emergency pass out sleep, and then after that you're dealing with the what you would normally have.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because having done a couple of Ironman triathlons, it took me I want to say 3 to 5 days afterwards before I could get a good night's sleep. Right.
Yeah. Wrecks your body. Your whole body is in this state of I need rest, and I need it's all over the place. It's crazy what happens to your body after you really push it to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about food and supplementation as it relates to sleep. Is there any kind of correlation that you think is interesting in that realm?
Caffeine is the big one.
Okay.
In terms of impacting stuff. There are other things. So ZMA is one there's not really much research at all on it. A lot of people report that they sleep better when they have ZMA supplements. There's a tiny bit of research on it, but there's a lot of research to show it doesn't do anything as well. Okay. So I'm very skeptical of that. And I mean, sleep is it's a really difficult thing to study, because you need to control everything that someone's doing in their life. How do you control somebody who's that little bit more stressed in their personal life than someone who isn't? Things like that. It's really difficult to do. So ZMA is one, and then the other one is melatonin. Melatonin, people think that melatonin is the big sleep hormone, and it is in general physiological terms. So you fall asleep when your melatonin levels go up high, and it stays high throughout the night, and then it dips in the morning, and cortisol level shoots up in its place, and that's what wakes you up. But I personally think cortisol levels are actually have more impact on your sleep at night than melatonin. And also, if you take melatonin supplements, there's very little evidence that it's interesting because there's not really much evidence to show that they work. I think it's more a placebo effect than this. Yeah, I know, and they sell a hell of a lot on that basis. This is, in general, with supplements, this is the deal. There's usually not crazy amount of research, but people make claims, and marketing is very powerful. So the jury is out for me on melatonin, and another one is CBD. CBD is something that's getting a lot of hot topic. I do not buy any of the research personally just yet on CBD or any of the claims. I want to see the research. It hasn't been studied enough for anybody to make any conclusions about what CBD does. There's potential, but the research isn't there yet. And personally, I err on the side of caution, especially when you hear something like CBD to claim to do everything. It makes you train better, recover better, sleep better, and better in bed. I'm not sure what else is going to come out in terms of CBD. So when you see something like that, you can it's got to be too good to be true. I want to wait and see what comes out. So, but the big one, let's come back to caffeine. Those supplements aside, the research is still not there. Please, anyone who's listening to this, I want to say, go and do your research. Jump on PubMed database, which is the government-run research database, and look for melatonin, ZMA, and sleep performance, and read studies. Don't just read one, read a few of them. Get your own general consensus on that. They're not that difficult to read. Go straight to the bottom of the study and see the conclusion, see what they're saying. Caffeine, though. Caffeine, I think, is the bane of all sleep. And it's primarily because I personally suffer from sleep loss if I drink caffeine. I don't drink it anymore and try and avoid it. But it is something that I've wrestled with my sleep. And the reason is caffeine leads to a jump in cortisol, which can last for a good amount of time. So it can last, in some people, it can last up to 10 hours sort of thing. So even if you're drinking caffeine and coffee only in the morning, if you're drinking a quadruple shot Starbucks, you have a lot of caffeine in your system, and that's going to mess with your system and get your cortisol levels through the roof. And you're going to have a hard time getting them down to have a decent night's sleep. It's going to cause you to sleep lighter, and you'll miss out on all of that good stuff like the growth hormone and the the deep sleep, stage 3 and 4 sleep at night. So that's one thing that is definitely going to impact your sleep. Caffeine. People have different levels of sensitivity to it, but for me personally, it's a big one. So I would avoid caffeine if you're having sleep issues. The first thing I would do is cut out coffee from your diet, and especially in the morning. Just forget it. Don't just try and go cold turkey for a few weeks. Deal with the headache and see what happens.
Man, you may have just lost a lot of fans right now.
I think so, but it's worth trying. When you come out the other end of it, like I have, it's amazing. It's like the energy level is amazing, but it does take that discipline. The big thing about coffee as well that I think I miss so much is the ritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, sorry to everyone out there who's listening, who's now looking at me and saying, "Okay, I'm about to tune out." I think that's what's going to happen there.
No, I think it's great advice, and I think like you said, everybody's is so different too, and it's worth it to, in my opinion, test these things on yourself. So take. How long would you say that someone should take or try going cold turkey to get a good assessment of if they can, number one, function without caffeine, or if I guess that's not the right, to see what their sensitivity is, and if they can live the life without it, and supplement a different ritual, perhaps. Like, what's that time frame that you think? Is it a month? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? To start seeing if they sleep better.
I think it's around the 2 week mark. It might be longer for some people. When I did it, I wasn't drinking that much coffee. I was drinking 1 to 3 cups of coffee a day, and not crazy strong either. I'm really sensitive to caffeine, so I don't need that much. And I know people drink an absolute ton of the stuff until they go to sleep. It took me about a week and a half, 2 weeks to get over the headache stage and withdrawal symptoms like that. And it was after that I started to really notice the difference. And that's me. I think it probably between 2 weeks and a month. You got to get over that headachy stage, I think, and that dependency to be, really over it and see that difference.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. And I've gone through a stage before where I've not had any caffeine for a year and a half. So I would totally agree with you and saying that, it's definitely worth doing that. And if nothing else, then to like figure out what your sensitivity levels are. Cause I feel like so many people are numb to it, and we just keep having more and more and more and more. It's like, yeah, cool. One shot of caffeine was fine at first, but then you wanted more. Now you're doing, like you said, the quadruple shot, and you're doing it in the morning, afternoon, and then you're wondering why you're not sleeping well, or you don't even realize it. You just feel like you have no energy all the time, except for right after that quadruple shot.
Yeah, totally.
So
yeah, how was your experience when you did decide to come off it? What was your experience?
I was going through a whole like adrenal fatigue thing where my body was shutting down and actually wasn't producing cortisol anymore, or very low levels, which is kind of no fun. So that was the reason why I stopped having the caffeine, and I didn't notice too much of it, except that I, after about a year and a half, decided that in low doses, I was more creative mentally when I had it. And doing a lot of writing and creative thinking, it did make me feel better when I was doing that. So I do low levels of caffeine and know that I just need to be very sensitive to it, like you're saying. And if I notice that I'm having any sleep issues, then I will back off of it. And unlike, well, I guess it depends on who we're talking to here, but like I track my sleep, every single night, and I do the sleep journaling, and I'm keeping track of, like, I have can look at a spreadsheet and see the amount of hours of sleep that I've gotten in the last year, right? Every single day.
Wow.
So I'm very sensitive to those metrics and trying to keep track of it, which I think makes it a little bit easier to control the caffeine consumption and know when it's affected me. But yeah, I decided at one point as a personal decision that I liked it better when I had my cup of coffee in the morning. I was just, my creative juices, like it was a decision of I'm enjoying my life better when I have a caffeine high and I'm writing. Versus not having a caffeine high and trying to like do meditation or like some sort of like brainwave stimulation to get that same feeling. So I mean, everybody has their own choices, and I don't know, that's where I ended up leaving off with it, and you can judge me if you want to.
I'm judging right now. Hey, you have that option, or you can do a Joe Rogan and start microdosing on acid or something like that to get that creativity. Everyone to themselves. They can do their own thing. That's
fine. Oh yeah, man. I'm reading this book by Dave Asprey right now. It's the Bulletproof guy.
Yeah.
I think it's called Superhuman, and that guy has some really interesting stuff in there. He's done all kinds of interesting hacks to decrease or slow down aging and things like this, and increase mental capacity. And that's That's a whole other level right there.
Totally. Yeah, he's an interesting character. I think that they're based near you, aren't they? They're in Washington. I think Bulletproof. He grew up. Didn't he grow up there?
Is it? I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
interesting character. That whole like life hacking that he
Yeah.
brought in is quite interesting. Yeah.
Oh, so interesting. So interesting. I want to ask you because I tend to tell people or give people advice on how to set up their room environment in order to sleep better. And one of the major things that I've had improvement on or seen improvement with is the whole blackout curtains and all of
Mm-hmm.
like making things as dark and quiet and, like you said, cold as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice on how to do that easily for people? Because I know that as soon as I mention it, I'm like, I get this roll of their eyes, like I'm not going to go buy blackout curtains, or how have you dealt with that?
Um, I think I order things on in terms of what's going to have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first thing, like I said earlier, is the whole going to bed and waking up at the same time. I would do it one at a time. So I would do that first.
Okay.
And the second thing is the room temperature. I would take
Oh,
the room temperature down a little bit, as I
okay.
think is quite an important one. Your body naturally fluctuates in temperature overnight and during the day. So you're warmer in the daytime, and your body temperature tends to be quite cool in the morning too. But in general, it's lower at night. So let your body temperature drop a little bit at night. This is what it's used to. I think being too warm at night, you see people be a lot more active, moving around because then they're uncomfortable because they're sweating basically. So I think that's the second one. The thing, complete blackout versus just being dark in your room, I don't think there's much of a difference. If it's the case of full on open windows and no curtains versus versus like curtains and things like that, that's going to make the biggest difference there. But the routine going to bed as well is more important than those things too. So I would say the order is your sleep and wake time. Then it would go, what did I say? Body temperature. That's the temperature of the room being the next one. Is that what I said?
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that the one before that. So sleep and wake time. Then I would go routine going to bed. So making sure you're not getting that screen time, lower level lights, not watching TV, that kind of thing. Then it's messing around with the architecture of your room. Do you have the blackout blinds, the temperature, the mattress? How firm, soft your mattress is. That's fine tuning for me. But I suggest doing it one at a time, so that you know the things that really impact you.
Okay, cool. And how about sleep time is based off of like the time that the sun goes down versus sun going up or coming up?
Yeah, I don't buy that. I think that you think of human beings, we should be equatorial. We should be living around the equator for temperature reasons. We here in BC, it's even though it's considered in Pacific Northwest where you and I are based right now.
Mm-hmm.
The temperature here is known to be pretty mild, but it still drops below freezing in the winter. And without shelter and clothing, we didn't have those, we would have a hard time. So generally, I think the human population would actually be living much more around the equator, where there's much more even night and day cycles. So you think if midwinter, especially here in Canada, if we are going on daylight cycles, we'd be sleeping for 12, 13 hours a night, which is unrealistic. And you're not going to do that. Your body isn't going to let you do it. You're going to wake up in the middle of the night kind of thing. So
Wow.
I think if I would say yes to people who are more equatorial, but people who live up in the, in where we do in latitudes, is it? And yeah, I don't think it's plausible.
Good to know. There's so much information out here on this subject that I love talking about it and hearing from people like you that have studied it and are really big on the science side of it. So I appreciate you just entertaining my questions right now. It's good
Keep them
stuff.
coming.
Yeah, do you have any resources that you recommend for things that you follow regularly to get sleep information or journals or blogs or anything like that?
I in terms of that stuff, I don't. I'm out. I've been out of the game for a little while on sleep medicine, really. But in general, as I mentioned before, the PubMed database, which is government run, is fantastic to if you really want to check something, because there's so much. Sleep is big business. Sleep is huge business, and there's a lot of companies trying to cash in on improving sleep, changing sleep. And people are always, it's because it's such a personal thing. People are vulnerable when they have a sleep issue. It can impact your day, your quality of life. So people are quite vulnerable. And if someone comes out with a supplement or a device or something that helps them sleep, they'll market to people and try and make money without really knowing it does anything. So to cut through all of that, your best bet is, one of the best bets you have is to go to the PubMed database and just see what research is there and read it. And it looks, sometimes it can be quite technical and it can be a wading through treacle to read some of this stuff, but it's worth it. Try and get to grips with it. You can even sometimes message there's email addresses to message the scientists and say, what do you mean, on this?
Oh,
yeah, you can do that. A lot of them will respond to you. So I would say that PubMed database, look for it on Google and check out the things like ZMA, melatonin, and see what the research actually shows on these products and devices and things like that before actually using them.
yeah, absolutely. Do you know anything about meditation or any type of brainwave stimulation that would help, or that you know of that actually does help with sleep?
I don't. Unfortunately, that's something I haven't really looked into. I'm much more focused on the physiological side of sleep, and the psychological side I don't really know that much about. That being said, I'm willing to bet, this is just thinking about it, meditation is a way of relaxing. And relaxation is about reducing our stress levels and cortisol levels. That's the most relaxed we feel is in that low stress environment. So I would say that would improve your level of sleep simply by reducing the cortisol load that you have.
Cool. Makes sense. Definitely makes sense. Awesome. Well, Rowan, I've had, as usual, fun talking with you, geeking out on subjects that we were both passionate about. So I really appreciate that. Where can people find out more about you, more about Blonyx, since we didn't really talk about that at all today, and just in general, follow your journey?
Absolutely. So my company website is www.blonyx.com, which is BLONYX. Anyone who wants to reach out to me or connect with me, you can do so via LinkedIn is probably the best. And if you look up my name, Rowan Minnion, last name is Minnion, and you'll find me. I'll be the only one.
Cool. Well, I will have all of these links in the show notes at allaroundjoe.com/245. And yeah, again, Rowan, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. And for all those people listening, if you haven't now understood why I'm such a big fan of Blonyx and Rowan in general, you're losing your mind, because this guy is the real deal and obviously backs everything by research. And I think that's freaking fantastic in this world where we tend to just believe what's on the media. It's really refreshing to talk with you, Rowan, and I super appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, we will talk to you soon.
Take care.
Hey guys, that was my podcast with Rowan Minnion, the CEO and founder of Blonyx, BLONYX, the supplement or lifestyle nutrition company. I hope you enjoyed that. Sleep is pretty much about the number one thing that I can think of when people ask me how to recover faster. It just makes you so much more in tuned. It helps you to recover, helps you to think better. And a lot of times people will just focus simply on the fact that, oh, I'm getting enough sleep, but they don't focus on the quality of sleep that they're getting, which is also just as important. So if you guys have any questions, please reach out to Rowan or myself, and we'd be happy to answer any of those questions for you. You can get to the show notes by going to allaroundjoe.com/245. That's allaroundjoe.com/245. And lastly, I highly recommend that you check out Blonyx and their supplements. I've been using their HMB plus creatine, I've been using their beta alanine, and I've been using their egg white protein powder for quite a while now. And you can get a discount on those supplements by using the code AllAroundJoe at checkout. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I will see you on the next one. The All Around Joe podcast, where we optimize your human performance from my personal experience as an athlete, coach, and all-around self-improvement junkie. I will see you on the next podcast.